Good evening. The tower clock has just finished its sixth chime, so we can commence. Welcome to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. I'm Dennis Willits, Councillor for Lexton and Braeswick Ward, and I'm chairing the meeting. The meeting, as usual, is being broadcast via Zoom over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel, where it will be available for everyone to watch afterwards. Matters of housekeeping, action in event of emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the high street and then the car park. For those attending here in the Moot Hall, I can assure you that a risk analysis, risk assessment, including COVID-19 risks, has been undertaken for this meeting. Can I remind everyone that seating is socially distanced. Please don't move the chairs. Masks can be removed when seated. With the exception of a Democratic Services officer advising us, would participants, both joining us online and in the Moot Hall, please mute microphones unless they're invited to speak. We'll have a short break at 8 o'clock if we haven't finished the business of the day by then. Would the other members of the committee please introduce themselves, starting with the Vice Chairman?
Councillor Lee Tate for Prettygate Ward.
Councillor Chris Hayter and St John's Ward.
Councillor Jackie McLean from Marksdale Lair Ward, substituting for Kevin Bentley.
Councillor Adam Fox, Old Heath, Hythe and Rowhedge.
Councillor Michelle Burrows, Wivenhoe Ward.
Councillor David King, Mile End.
And I understand we have some apologies this evening, as we're not a full team.
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from Councillor Nissen this evening.
Substitutions have been dealt with in introductions. Urgent items, I'm not advised of any. Declarations of interest regarding those items on the agenda. Does any member of the committee wish to declare an interest? Minutes of the previous meeting. I invite the committee to confirm the minutes or amend them if they feel that there are matters that need fixing. Councillor King gave forward notice that he wanted to speak on the minutes. So if that's okay, Councillor Fox, he goes first, then you pick up whatever else we've done wrong or documented wrong that hasn't been sorted. So, Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. There's no need for me to speak. There's 2 typographical errors and an excellent record. I'll pass those to the officers, and if they're content, I'm sure everybody else would be.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just run through the amendments before the committee approve the minutes, if that's okay. So the first is on page 3 in the resolution, which should now read, resolved that the committee had reviewed the financial performance of general fund services and the housing revenue account for the first 3 months of 2021-22, and that the forecast budget overspend of 146,000 on the general fund be noted. And there's the addition of the word reviewed there. And the second error is page 4 of the minutes, paragraph 5, line 3, the misspelling of the word full, which will be corrected. And that's all that's from me. Thank you.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't have any problems with the minutes, but I just wanted to check that, as per page 14 of the document pack, that a letter was written expressing the committee's displeasure around the audit appointments, and if so, could the committee receive a copy of that letter by email, please?
Yes, Councillor Fox, I can confirm that a draft letter was prepared in parliamentary language rather than the language which I used at the committee, so as not to offend unduly the auditor, and was dispatched. A reply was received, and I think I furnished the reply to the committee clerk. I'm not sure whether it has been sent round.
No, the reply hasn't been sent, Chairman, but I can send both those documents round to the committee, so they're aware.
So we undertake that as an action from this meeting to ensure that
Thank you very much.
the letter and the response are with all members of the committee. It didn't really tell us anything new, but it gave us the opportunity as a committee to express our displeasure with, we were very pleased that our officers were able to prepare everything in time, and very displeased that the auditor then was not able to act upon it. If there are no further amendments, can we approve the minutes? Thank you, committee. Have your say. I don't see anyone. No, have your says. So that takes us on to the first substantial item on the agenda, which is the annual letter of review from the Social Care Ombudsman. And this is being dealt with by Andrew Weaver's Strategic Governance Manager.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good evening. This report before you tonight is the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman's annual review letter for 2021. This letter this year is slightly different in the fact that it doesn't really say much in the usual sort of detail that we get from the Ombudsman, mainly because the Ombudsman's office stopped taking in complaints due to the pandemic. But the headlines for you as set out in paragraph 5.1 of the report, there were no findings of maladministration or public interest reports issued against the Council. Otherwise, Chair, I'd just like to say as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weavers. My only comment on this is on 5.5, where in the league table, in the column satisfactory remedies provided by the council, the Colchester entry is none. Well, it's none because there were no complaints, but I feel that that gives the wrong flavour to our position in the league table. Because clearly, if there were no complaints, there was we satisfied all remedies which may have been provided. And I think perhaps there should be better terminology in that table. Colleagues, are there any? Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew, for the work that lies behind this. I'd just like to ask about the Ombudsman's remarks. The report itself sets out what we would hope to see, which is that we have in all years very few complaints of substance, if I translate it, and we act upon them, we know when we do. But the Ombudsman makes some interesting remarks about the erosion of effective complaint functions, and I think that is worthy conversation. What's your view about that? How robust do we think our processes are? And many of us will have a particular concern for those who are not perhaps that well equipped to use complaints processes. So could you sort of touch on those two things? How robust do we think we are? How accessible do we think we are? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I would say that our complaint system is an effective complaint handling system. The Ombudsman has, I believe, commented on that in the past. We do make it very accessible for customers to make complaints if they so choose to do so through the website. I would say that the comments in this letter are not directed specifically at Colchester. It is a standard wording that has been put in all local authorities' annual review letters. I have looked at a few of them. So just if I can give you that sort of reassurance. Thank you.
I think if we look at table 5.4, comparison over the years, it is clear that that when members of the public have felt that there is a complaint, they have been able to do so, to the extent of 23 complaints in 2015-16, and sort of similar numbers at times in the intervening years. But it was a very strange year, and not only for the the number of complaints, but also sort of health and safety, which we get onto next. It was an atypical year because of COVID, and hopefully next year we'd have a similar low number of complaints, but we can look at the problem two ways. Is if there are no complaints, it could mean that it is too difficult, but we have made it as easy as possible. And other than sending officers out to knock on doors and say, have you got a complaint against the council? I think the balance seems just a little right, but I think Councillor King's point is good. We should ensure that there is no further erosion of the ease with which it's possible to make a complaint. Are there any further comments on this particular item? So we're asked to note the contents of the annual review letter. Is that noted? Thank you. We now move on to item 8, the health and safety report for the year 2020 to 21, where Hayley McGrath, Corporate Governance Manager, and Carl Free, our Corporate Health and Safety Officer, will be guiding us through this report.
Thank you, Chair. Carl is going to do most of the introduction for you and talk you through the report and the details, and I'm just here to provide some more of the strategic answers. So I'll hand over to Carl.
Thank you. So I'm just going to talk through the health and safety report to begin with, if that's okay. The main points, it's on page 26. The main points really is it's from October to September this year, October last year obviously to September this year. So the focus was on COVID-19 arrangements and supporting staff and teams again. So it's a slight priority towards that compared to the standard action plan for health and safety. Obviously towards this, coming up towards the end of the year is now going back on track to focus again on the usual health and safety items. So I've detailed some of those in there, the health and safety audits and reviews, making sure obviously the services and different risks and hazards are managed suitably. And then obviously if there's any actions, producing an action plan for teams to resolve those. I've detailed the two, what are currently being worked on. Say our health safety committee meetings continued virtually using Teams, so that was good. We could continue to do the continual monitoring and get together with the designated officers to share learning and challenges from COVID-19. The regular actions from the fire risk assessments. So annual review for most buildings because of the nature of the buildings containing a number of staff or customers. So we do those annually and it's completed by an external fire safety consultant. We're getting the reports through on that. But there hasn't been any significant issues. There's obviously continuous improvements going on, but those are actioned, and like I said, that I will raise any of those through the standard reporting processes going forward if there is any. Face-to-face training was obviously postponed or reduced where possible because of the pandemic to try and reduce transmission. So this year there's an increase in training to get back on track where we were. The executive management team, there's a health and safety training about leadership for health and safety training and being good leaders in health and safety. So from the top, see, the best way is to give the encouragement from the top about health and safety to go down to all the managers, and then further on the managers being trained on health and safety training as well. So there's a number of courses booked for early next year for our managers across the council. As the operational side, making sure they are doing the correct things, putting in the right risk assessments, control measures to keep their staff and customers safe. Looking at incidents we've had, we haven't had any serious incidents this year, the report year, what are RIDDOR reportable to the HSE, the Health and Safety Executive. So these are very serious incidents like fractures and sort of 7 days off work or more, and members of the public being taken to hospital for treatment. So that's a good sign, and those are continuing to come down really over the years. So we don't want to get too cautious of those numbers coming down, making sure people are reporting these incidents, which they are. Nothing's really changed on that. We're still getting incidents reported. So I believe that is a true case of where we are. And possibly, obviously, reduced customers coming into our centres and different areas potentially has an impact on that. Staff working at home, but we didn't get a large amount of incidents in the office. It's mainly obviously the operational staff where the sort of incidents occur, slips, trips and manual handling, things like that. And one of the focuses for this year and next is water safety. So it's been on the agenda to do just to make sure we are being legally compliant and keeping our residents safe for any sort of water sources that we have. And it, like I said, coincides. There's a UK drowning prevention strategy. Unfortunately, drowning fatalities still occur, so it's trying to reduce those, and we've obviously aligned with that. And that comes to the end of the report. Thank you.
Hayley, do you have anything else to add?
Only that our health and safety processes are a fundamental part of our risk management framework. So it's part of the actions that we undertake for the physical risks. So when you're considering the strategic risk register, the health and safety processes that we have in place do have an impact, which is why we bring this report to you on an annual basis, so you can review that as part of your assurances for the risk management process.
Thank you. If I could start the questioning, there are clearly sort of the risk-based approach, which underlines most of the policies which we produce in this area. And there's also the event-based. In the past, there have been incidents which indicate that perhaps policies might be deficient in some way. This year, there are a couple of mentions in paragraph 5.2 and 5.13 about incidents, but I see nothing in the report which suggests that there have been any serious incidents which would have jolted us into asking whether the policies are ineffective or insufficient in any way. So in the absence of serious issues, we assume, I think, as a committee, that the usual quality improvement process will be working on the raft of policies as is to be expected. However, in 5.2, you do make reference to a couple of events, that there is an ongoing audit of A12 litter picking and hand-arm vibration. Clearly, I assume we'll be seeing the result of those audits at some stage in the future. And likewise, in 5.13, there's a RIDDOR issue of someone picking up a bin. I wonder whether you can just add a little detail to that to assure us that these are issues which are being dealt with as part of the existing raft of policies, and that we should not be prompting significant change because of these issues.
Did you say about the incident last year to clarify about that, or is that what you mentioned? Sorry, I didn't hear that part. Sorry, just the final part you said.
Sorry, I didn't get that. Could you?
Okay, yeah, sorry. I thought you said about the bin lift incident, but I couldn't quite hear it. But Dan's just clarified. Yeah, so any incident is reported or hopefully reported, and it has an investigation stage of it. So managers to investigate. So like you said, the absence of incidents, there has been some sort of more smaller sort of not significant incidents, but they are all investigated as well to make sure those policies and arrangements in place are adequate. And the bin lift, staff fractured their wrist on the bin lift, that was a more serious one, so I investigated that one. So part of the investigation process was the reviewing all the policies and paperwork in place, and we did have all the risk assessments in place. The member of staff was trained, the bin lift was working as it should be. So it was sort of put down more to human error. The person did say that it wasn't a very nice day. They were rushing a bit because something wasn't quite right on that day. I think they were in a different sort of mindset really. So the staff were reminded using their new messaging system, what they have, which is great. So we can get messages out to them on the sort of front line, reminded that the bin lifts are very dangerous, and one of the key points is to stand back when it's in use, and there's a sort of danger zone to stay away from. So they were reminded of that, and it went out to the whole team as well. We haven't had any since then, so I believe that's working correctly.
Thank you. Sorry, the echo was catching up with me at one stage. Councillor Fox, I think, was first, then Councillor King. Anyone else?
Thank you, Chair. I beat Councillor King to it this time. I just wanted to ask a little bit about home working. Obviously, the last couple of years, we'd have had more people working from home rather than in the office. And I just wondered if you could talk through the processes that we put in place in terms of our responsibilities for them if they are working at home. Thank you.
So yeah, the working at home obviously was a key part of sort of the start of the pandemic. So one of the things, the main thing is most of them working on computers. So we updated the display screen equipment, computer guidance, and the assessment. So it included a larger part for working at home, making sure it's set up correctly, and also talking about sort of fire safety in the home and slips, trips and falls, sort of trailing wires, because we don't have control of that like we do a workplace. So it's more responsibility on the members of staff, but obviously providing them the guidance to be able to work safely. So we did that at the start, and that seems to be working well. And also providing them with the correct equipment, so with the rollout of laptops and risers, and obviously can use monitors, borrow monitors and chairs and things from the office. I think obviously going forward, just we're deciding on how we can make sure everyone is getting the right equipment to work at home, but that is a part of the check as well, of the assessment, that stating what equipment should they have at home, and they can check yes or no, they haven't got that. If they press no or any concerns, it goes to the manager to then obviously action. So I think that's working well. I haven't seen any issues really with home working. I think people have done that well and followed the guidance really.
Thank you very much.
Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. And that was good to hear about home working. A couple of points on the paper, if I may, Carl. On 510, we would all welcome both the refurbishment, the changes that come with it, and the fact that you described some of the fire safety and other improvements. I think that sort of just begs an open question, which is that if you had the choice to make other changes, because clearly these are desirable and you've got an opportunity in the changes to the building, are there other things that you would want to be doing? And if so, could you describe them to us? I've got a question after that. Thank you.
The changes to the building itself. I think one of the things is the overall condition of the building, really. It needs some uplift potentially, but it doesn't really create a health and safety hazard per se, if that makes sense. Obviously, there are some comments from staff and things like that, but the fire safety improvements, I think we're the fire risk assessment just identifies some slight improvements there. Overall, the sounders and detectors and emergency lighting, some of them are potentially moved from when different use of the building and just in incorrect places, but nearby. So I think that's identified those. And really, I don't think there's any other significant changes. The main part is the ventilation, which is being changed to the row and house because of COVID-19 procedures. It's become now the priority, really, ventilation, COVID-19. We've seen it change, really, of society now taking those type issues more seriously and linking them with flu and other respiratory sort of diseases. So it's also something going forward is looking at all the other buildings, just making sure ventilation is suitable. It's a difficult area because it's not exact science, really. So they're currently producing sort of guidance to help facility managers to show where potentially ventilation isn't that great. But as you can imagine, it's like I said, it's not that exact science, so it's a bit of guesswork. But I think we're identifying those poor areas now, and going forward, it will be those improvements to all the buildings potentially. But I don't think there's not that many, really, and it's also obviously learning about COVID-19. It's where people stay for a long time and lots of people in a small space. So that's why the ventilation is sort of a key, because the COVID particles build up in small sort of areas. So ventilation basically gets rid of them, but how much is too much and not enough, and how much ventilation is enough, that's that very grey area. But it's clear to see where it's very poor, to identify those areas for improvements, and that's what I say is key, really, at the moment.
Thank you. And Chair, if I may, just one supplementary. 516, I'm sure we all, again, welcome anything which looks at risk in the wider community, and here we refer to preventing drowning, by its nature dreadful for all concerned. What do we have in terms of a datum point, in terms of what we know and understand around those areas for which we have a responsibility in terms of near misses and fatalities?
So yeah, we get some reports through the Essex Resilience Forum about fatalities from drowning. I'm not sure if there's just incidents, and that's one of the challenges of it, really, that getting those different parties linked together. So obviously most of the time it may be from the fire service or the police, and there isn't that great connect of getting that detail. Where we have some in our own, our staff have assisted or anything, like Castle Park, for example, and obviously we have those statistics of how many we've had and people gone in the water and needed assistance. So yeah, we've identified our areas of sort of water sources and open water, and have action plans and risk assessments in place, and it's looking at preventing people going in that water, really, to begin with, and then sort of obviously how we can assist those. And this review will really hopefully tell us, are we doing enough, or is there more that we can do? It's a complicated area again, really, because it's like one of those, you do put a sign saying danger water here when it's obvious. It's the sign's there to help people where it's not obvious hazards. So having lots of sort of bushes and foliage and things to stop people getting in the water obviously is ideal. So where we have those, we think they're obviously currently compliant, but hopefully this review will tell us that is the case, or actually is there some things we need to change. So I'm obviously keen to see that, which is next month, and we'll have a report from that.
Could I ask for a point of clarification on Councillor King's first question, which seemed to suggest that there was a discretionary element of what needed to be done. Health and safety seems to be, to me, and perhaps I need educating on the matter, it seems to be very specific that we have a duty to ensure that employees who may be affected can work safely. So are there any issues, for instance, with Rowan House, where in your professional view, the risks or the current situation should be addressed, but it is not being addressed because of financial considerations, and you would therefore say that we had not carried out our duty to ensure that employees can work safely without risk to their health or safety?
No, I don't think there's any current areas. The refurbishment work, I think, is, I said, covering the ventilation side of things and hopefully the fire safety improvements.
So the issues that you would like to do, and I mean, there are always things we'd like to do and cannot afford to do, definitely do not fall into the category of things that we should be doing.
Yeah, no.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from members of the committee? Councillor McLean.
Just for clarity on the water situation, I'd like to get an understanding of what you're talking about. Is that every water hole in Colchester that's in the borough? So when we do like a building, like Lakelands or something, you've got that waterway. Are we in charge of that for drowning? That's what I was just trying to work out, because I'm not, as I'm new on this committee, I would just like to know where you're actually coming from regarding that sort of situation.
I'm not sure on that specific one, but it's where we're sort of the landowner or the water owner of that water source. So where we're aware, sort of in the parks and the countryside, Highwoods Country Park, and it is a shared issue as well a lot of the time. So sometimes there's landowners up to the water, and then we perhaps own the water itself. So we obviously can't put anything on that land. So it's a complicated situation. That's sort of why obviously the strategy is also put in place to get all the stakeholders together. And what part of the report will do is identify who those stakeholders are, to be able to get everyone involved and make sure the residents or whoever are safe in Colchester, really.
They come back. So the rivers running through Colchester, you're in charge of all of those? Or is it the River Authority? Or I mean, that's where I was thinking, because that's a heck of an area to keep an eye on people, especially with the youngsters and being let loose.
Yes, so that will be reviewed, but like I said, some of it will be landowners. If it's trying to stop people getting into the water, so if there's no access, then it's not an issue, is it, if you're a landowner? So it's potentially where we're like the landowner on that side. So that's what that consultant's going to review to make sure sort of every area where there's potential sort of risk, where we need to evaluate and put those controls in, we will, as a sort of council, do that, or work with the relevant sort of parties. If that answers the question. Sorry, it's not an easy one.
Continuing on item 516, I remember a delightful incident 6 years ago where the council, in its capacity as harbour master, seized possession of a boat at the Hythe without first nailing the writ to the mast, and we had judgment against us for acting improperly. And that was the first time I'd learned that the council executes the function of harbour master. Are there any water issues or drowning issues associated with council officers exercising their duty as harbour master at the Hythe?
Not that I'm aware. No, I'm not sure, sorry.
Mr. Gascoigne.
Yeah, just to confirm that the harbour master in Brightlingsea looks after the river in respect of navigation and buoyage and those sorts of issues, but clearly we would be working with them on the outcomes of any review so that we are clear about any actions that need to be taken and whether that would be some responsibilities that the harbour master would take on our behalf. But we don't have officers acting in the capacity as harbour master. Indeed, we no longer have a port.
Oh, interesting. Yes, but thank you for the clarification. Any more comments? Yes.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could give a little more detail, please, with regards to 514. You're talking about near-miss reporting, which continues to be encouraged and promoted. Would you say there's a particular area within the various working environments within Colchester Borough Council that you are noticing a bigger recording of near misses? What area might that be in? Thank you.
So we get good near-miss reports from the leisure service and the waste collection service. It's definitely one of the priorities to encourage near-miss reporting because it prevents potential accidents going forward, and it's basically like an almost accident happening. So if someone's not being injured, let's get it reported and resolved, because the next time it could just as likely be someone being injured. I think it's one of those, it's definitely something that's, like I said, a priority, and try and make it as easy as possible for people to report those and tell them the significance of it. So in the health safety induction, near miss is included in that, to tell staff and managers, anyone starting at the council, why it's important and how to do that. And there's also physical near-miss cards, so for operational staff. So I think that helps with the waste and the sport and leisure team. So they have cards they can just fill in sort of by hand and send them over. So obviously not everyone has access to a computer just as easily. But yeah, we get a good amount of near-miss sort of reports each year, really, but it has fallen sort of in the last year, but it's to continue to encourage and promote that. And it's, like I said, it is part of the induction sort of training, and we will continue to report that and encourage it through the Health Safety Committee and the managers, and that'll be part of the training as well of why near-miss is important.
Thank you.
Following on from Councillor Burrows' question, do we give advice on how near a miss is before it has to be reported? There must be sort of far misses where it's just could possibly have been an issue which was reportable, or is a graduated scale. So do we give our people advice on how close it has to be before they think it should be reported?
So it's more of a, yeah, like I said, if it's something that's almost caused an accident, also linking it in with hazard reporting or issue reporting. And so in the training it says no sort of issue is too minor, really. I'd rather get more and be able to go back and say that's not an issue. So it's near miss and hazard reporting as well, and putting those two things together. So I don't think there's not a specific what's a near miss, but given examples, saying sort of something on some spillage on the floor and someone stumbled, or something fell, someone had sort of maybe felt something in their back, but it's not an injury when they've been doing some manual handling. So I give examples like that. Someone noticed something, a trailing wire on the floor, to try and give people an idea of what they are, and that has that in the training. So I think we do, but not to a specific sort of level. So it's better to be broader and get the things that I say that may not be needed to be reported, but encouraging people to continue to report anything they find, because you're going to get the real gems in there to be able to resolve those, and easily can just ignore or just go feedback on the other ones.
Thank you. Any further questions? Oh, Councillor Burrows.
Sorry, thank you. But just for clarification and assurance, you wouldn't say that either the leisure or the environmental services that you mentioned that near misses are being recorded, there aren't so many in one particular area that it was caused concern about working practices?
No, it's just they're good at reporting.
If there are no further questions, we need to note the health and safety report for 2021 and approve the health and safety policy. Do we note and approve? Thank you. Can I thank you, Carl, for coming here to be grilled? It's a very important area. of our policy. And thank you for explaining it to us. We now fast forward as fast as our computers will go to item 9, where we are joined by colleagues from Colchester Borough Homes to consider the governance assurance statement from their organisation. And we have Matt Armstrong and Karen Smoot joining us. If the technology works. Yes, yes.
Thank you, Chair.
How? The floor is yours.
Thanks, Chair, and good evening, committee. So this report is to present the Colchester Borough Homes annual governance statement, which aims to give assurance to the council of CBH's strong governance arrangements. I'd like to introduce Karen Smout, one of our independent board members and vice chair of the Finance and Audit Committee, who will present the report, and then we're both happy to take any questions at the end. So I'll pass over to Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Good evening, Chair and Committee. Yes, I am Karen Smout. I've been an independent member of the board since October 2019. I'm a chartered accountant and I have a background in audit and risk, so lots of relevant experience. The board has 4 independent members, 3 councillors, one of whom is Councillor Burrows, and 3 resident members. It's very important to us that we hear the residents' voice in what we're doing. We tweaked our governance structure over the last 12 months. We now have 3 committees, previously 2. One of those new committees is the Operations and Performance Committee, which enables us to give a greater amount of scrutiny to those areas, operations and performance. And we also relaunched the Residents' Voice panel, which has seen improved engagement in recent months. All of our committees and the board meetings went virtual, and that's worked well during the pandemic situation, and we're still virtual at the moment. We updated our Code of Governance in December 2020 and adopted the National Housing Federation Code of Governance. We moved to using TIAA internal auditors in April 2020, in line with Colchester Borough Council. We've been very impressed with their professionalism. They have a risk-based approach, so they're more focused on the important areas. And they've also been providing insights for the board and officers on external risks and emerging areas of concern. The results of their audits have been very positive, and they attend all of our F&A committees, and we're able to have a good dialogue with them about their findings. Risk management, we adopted a new risk management policy in February 2020. It's less complicated, it's easier for staff and board to engage with and to understand. And we've continued a programme of engagement, particularly for the board, but also with staff, so training and embedding and giving more structure to risk discussions at F&A and at the board. External audits, we're fortunate in that our accounts for 31st of March 2021 have been signed off. Since the governance statement was written, we have received the management letter from Scott and Bland, and there were no governance or control issues. The only point of note was going concern and the viability of CBH based solely on our pension liability, which I'm sure you're very aware of because it's supported by Colchester Borough Council and it's the same pension scheme. So our accounts have been signed off on the basis of that CBC support. Overall, I would say we have a good open dialogue at F&A between the internal auditors, the external auditors, and our CBH officers about governance matters, risk, and audit findings. Do you have any questions for us?
I'll just wait for the motorbike to go by. When silence.
I can hear it from here.
My first question is about the way risk management and strategic risks change over the course of time. If we think back about 5 years or so, Colchester Borough Homes essentially was managing domestic dwellings and leasehold premises on behalf of the Borough Council. If we look at the portfolio holder this year, and we had colleagues from Colchester Borough Homes at the scrutiny panel telling us what they did, there has been a broadening of the activities, for instance, managing the contract for the Mercury Theatre, sort of moving away from domestic property management to commercial property management and refurbishing. Has that required you in any way to modify the risks, the risk management approach that you take, the risks that you identify, and your strategic risks that you've documented?
I would say yes. We are addressing risk in every board meeting and inviting the board to raise any strategic concerns and strategic risks that they have. The risk register is kept up to date with anything that we feel is relevant to the activities we're doing. So yes, it covers more than just delivering an excellent service to our residents. We also have legislation coming online that we have to keep abreast of, the social housing white paper and the decent home standards, which we incorporate into what we're doing. But also there's lots coming online. There's new technology that's getting the most out of our new housing management system. All of that is reflected in our risk register.
Thank you. Colleagues, questions? Councillor King.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen, for talking to the report and for the positives within it. I'd just like to go back over some of the ground raised by the chair a moment ago, because in our experience, I think the quality of the discussion is the critical thing. Producing a risk register obviously is important, and these can, in some organisations, be an issue of box, tick, show and tell. Could you talk about the quality of the conversations that are held, the robustness of them, and the willingness of the senior leaders to accept that their judgments may not always be, by the nature of things, right, and therefore that modification exposed by the risk process is required? Thank you.
Absolutely. So since I've been involved on the F&A committee, we have adopted a risk deep dive approach. So we are reviewing the highest risk on the risk register, and we are getting relevant experts from within CBH to come and talk to that risk. We are challenging them on how they've rated the risk and on the mitigating actions that are either in place or planned, and whether those actions are sufficient to drive that risk down to an acceptable level. So it is quite a robust conversation, and we are making sure we take the time to have that deep dive into those big risks. And then we've got the overlay of board saying, stepping back from it and saying, what do we feel are the big risks, and are they reflected in the risk register? And fit that feedback loop back round to the officers to say, where's this risk? How are you covering it? Can we have more information on it?
Thank you. Could I ask a supplementary, which is about the resident's voice? What you've described in your couple of responses is, as we'd hope, professional people having a very professional conversation, and more than content to accept from what we can see, validated by external and internal audit, that it is a process that, at least so far, and in the promise, works. But the independence of a voice that comes from residents, it really interests me, because that's where you can get a different angle. It's closer to those who experience the quality of the service. Could you just talk about how much that voice is given room to breathe, and how it's applied in the processes that you've described? Thank you.
Yes, so the Tenants Voice panel they have a slot on all of our board meetings and report back on the findings and discussions from their meetings, and they're able to highlight concerns of our residents, and those will be investigated by the officers. So, and obviously we've also got the mechanism of the wider complaints process, which is also feeding through into our board meetings. So we should be able to pick up flavours and strands of concern from the residents.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from members of the committee? Might I ask a second question? It's shown in the report that there was a marginal reduction in the number of audits that were carried out this year compared with previous. Was it a positive decision to reduce the number of audits now you're risk-based, as opposed to keeping the level of auditing resource constant and perhaps expanding it to a wider base beyond those where the risk-based approach indicated audit was necessary?
I think I'll let Matt speak to that one because he was more directly involved in that, how the contract was set up.
Thanks, Karen. Yes, we did find that. So we previously had, I say, a regime of the same type of audits every year. And we were roughly averaging about 90 days of audit a year. I think when we moved to a risk-based approach, what we found is it was a lot more focused. So actually we could use audit to our benefit. And we have quite good conversations once a year when TIR come in, when our internal auditors come to the Finance Audit Committee. We discuss the next year's plan as well as the 3-year plan at the same time. So it means we get a good view of the whole business. They can advise us on some of the emerging risks in the sector. So therefore we can also take that on board. And also if there's any projects, you mentioned like the Mercury Theatre, and we've just introduced a new housing system. So for instance, when that was put in, we ensured that there was, internal audit came in and reviewed how we did that process and sort of can feed back to the committee and to us as officers in terms of any issues. So yeah, I think it was a positive way of doing it, and actually I think we get a much better benefit from the internal audit by doing that risk-based approach.
I was just going to mention that same example, the housing management system, because that is an area, new systems are inevitably an area of high risk, and that was very good to have them dig into that and see that it had been implemented well.
Can I just ask, your action plan on page 80, 2 of the 3 points are due for completion by next month. I just wondered if you could give us an update on how you're progressing with those, please.
I'll let you cover that one, Matt, please.
Yeah, no problem. So the Management Agreement Action Plan, that is something that we are working in partnership with the council for. So we had a whole list of actions when we reviewed the management agreement, and obviously successfully extended that. And there's a whole list there of working through. I'd say we've probably done about half of the actions on that action plan, and the others are all in progress in terms of completing. Some of them will move slightly later than the November date, and that's really just around timing of decisions and also additional sort of government legislation that's come in since we conducted that. But they will all be in place ready for the signing of the new management agreement next year. In terms of the strategic plan, that's something that the board and the senior management team are working on at the moment. And we're about to go out to consultation with our staff as well to get their views before going to consultation as well with other stakeholders, including councillors. So that November date is likely to move slightly maybe to December. Again, I think that's done really for timing. So we've got a new chief executive that only started in September. I think that's given him enough time to actually get into that strategic plan and learning the business before putting that forward. That strategic plan is not required or it'll be in place as of the 1st of April. So we do have a bit of time on that one, but it'll be around about December time that will be finished.
Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Matt, when we look at paragraph 4.1, which talks of the 9 internal audit reviews, quite rightly, you and we would be pleased to see the improvement year on year, and the fact that it suggests or shows that your control environment's improved with substantial assurance increasing from 2 to 4. I'm always interested by your feel for those which aren't as substantial, or sort of what lies underneath the surface of the assessment. So we've got 5 for which there's reasonable assurance. What's your sense of where those might be in a year's time? How confident are you that you can hold that position, or in an ideal world, and we're not in one, improve? So some sense of what lies under the skin of the assessment would be good to hear. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor King. Yes, so I think it's all going in the right direction, but I think we're in a rapidly changing world where even if we're doing audits yearly or 3 yearly, things can change, and that's, I think, why a good sort of process we have at the Finance Audit Committee is to review the mitigations, both those in place and those that are planned. Some of the reasons why they're reasonable are things we know about. So as a board, we've set a risk appetite, so we know the key things where board would take, things like compliance, for instance, where there is no appetite to take any risk. Whereas there's other things where I think just generally with resources being difficult, then a little bit of risk is accepted, and sometimes that reflected in a reasonable statement. So there might be things come across where it's acceptable to be at where it is. One of the other areas I think that does come across quite a lot, where we get a reasonable assurance, is our IT systems and our record keeping, and that's something that we're constantly trying to work towards. And actually the new housing management system that we've just put in place has now provided a much more integrated way of working. So previously we had probably 7 or 8 different systems all holding information, and so therefore you can imagine sometimes quite difficult to pull out quickly evidence of whatever you might want to do. So although I think I was confident it was there, it was hard to evidence. I think with the new integrated system, and we're just sort of getting to grips with that now, I think that'll be another 12 months before we are fully in seeing the benefits of that system. It's all in one place and much more accessible. So I think the reasonable assurance things I'd say I'd probably summarise are either A, system-based, which we're working towards, or B, they're within the risk appetite of the board, that may be accepted on the basis of resources in trying to sort of get that to full assurance.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Of course, this report does not stand in isolation, because over past years, we've on many occasions we've looked at the governance arrangements at Colchester Borough Homes, and we've had the professional opinion of our officers, particularly Hayley McGrath, on the compatibility of the approaches taken by the Borough Council and its wholly owned subsidiaries, and we've seen excellent practice in both organisations, which is different at times, but overall approximates to the same style, the same good practice. We note in 4.2 that the head of their internal audits opinion is that the areas reviewed during the year at Colchester Borough Homes is reasonable and effective risk management control and governance processes in place. We've noted the report, the report, what has been done, the standard and the achievements in the audits for the year. So I certainly have a very warm feeling about the work which Matt and Karen are carrying out to ensure that risk and governance is exemplary. So committee, can we therefore conclude that we've considered the governance assurance statement of Colchester Borough Homes, and we accept that the assurance provided by Colchester Borough Homes regarding its governance arrangements throughout 2021 is of an excellent standard, which we approve. Is it your wish that we so resolve? Thank you. Could I thank you, Matt and Karen, for addressing us this evening? Most helpful.
You're very well.
Right, last time it was the motorbike, this time it's the chiming clock. But we'll press on regardless, colleagues. The next item, item 10, is a verbal update by Mr. Weavers on progress on digital meetings following COVID-19.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm just going to give you, a verbal update on where we are with remote meetings going forward. Just want to take us back a bit. If we go back to the 25th of March, 2021, that was the date that the government launched its call for evidence on local authority remote meetings, and which we as a council responded to and confirmed that we were in favour of the ability to hold hybrid meetings if we so wished. The current position is that we are still awaiting hearing from the government as to its response on how this may be taken forward. So that means that we are left with running traditional in-person meetings, I think, for the foreseeable future. And that being so, we need to ensure that the meetings that we do hold are safe for members, particularly with rising infection rates. So we are continuing with our dynamic risk assessments for meetings in accordance with our responsibilities under the Health and Safety at Work Act, as opposed to under any coronavirus regulations. I'm very aware there are members who remain anxious and concerned at the prospect of returning to normal, in inverted commas, meetings, particularly in the council chamber for full council, where no social distancing is possible. Following agreement from the group leaders, we are holding tomorrow night's full council here in the Moot Hall with some mitigation in place, albeit comprising 1 metre social distancing and the wearing of face coverings except when speaking. We will continue to assess the situation before each meeting in the light of the then current circumstances. However, I want to stress again, our overriding concern must be the health and well-being of members and officers attending formal meetings. So turning to the technological solutions for live streaming of meetings, we are continuing to assess those potential solutions to enable live streaming to continue. The Town Hall, as you know, is a Grade 1 listed building, and we have 3 completely different meeting rooms within the Town Hall. And there isn't one solution that will suit all. We're going to need, it looks as though we're going to need a bespoke solution for each room. Again, that being so, we're going to focus on the Grand Jury Room, West Committee Room, to be the first room that we equip to be suitable for a sort of fixed live streaming. And my Democratic Services team and the IT team are working closely to find that technological solution to enable us to move forward. And we intend to keep the committee informed as to progress and how we're doing. Chair, that was just the update I wanted to give you reassurance around health and safety of members being of paramount importance, and the fact that we are trying to find a technological solution for live streaming going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Could I start off the questioning? Whether or not a member of the council has been vaccinated is a private matter, which is nothing to do with us. But nevertheless, do you have a feel for the percentage of councillors who are sort of double jabbed, if not double jabbed, plus booster at this time?
Thank you, Chairman. No, I do not. But I could make a guess based on certain factors, but I wouldn't like to do that.
So we're not really able to take that factor, even a broad approximation to that factor, into our risk analysis in determining what is safe under health and safety arrangements.
It's in the back of our minds, yes, Chair, but it isn't driving the risk assessment as such. Bear in mind that people who have still been double jabbed are still susceptible to catching COVID, perhaps not so and being not affected so seriously, but we still have members who have been infected by COVID and are not able to attend some meetings. And sorry, and can I just underline the significance of, just remind you of the ability not to attend physical meetings. You can dial in remotely, you can participate remotely, but you cannot vote in a physical meeting when you are joining it remotely. And that does have a consequence, obviously, around the political balance, which you know in this particular authority is very finely balanced.
And my second question is in regard to the innovative work going on live streaming in this historic building. Is there sufficient budget for us to proceed with a solution if a solution were to be found which you felt had the appropriate balance between preserving the building and enabling our meetings to be made available to the public at large?
Yes, Chairman, I am absolutely confident we have sufficient budget to enable us to do that.
Thank you. Committee, are there questions on the verbal report? It appeared you covered every issue to such an extent that we're left speechless, Mr. Weavers.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for your attendance. And that brings us to the final item, well, the final substantive item other than the work programme on the agenda for this evening, which is the assurance on the Council's cyber security provision. Members will recall that that very recently we had a teach-in on the Council's, the security of the Council's systems. It's a highly technical subject, and there are aspects of it where perhaps we don't want the world at large to know precisely how we deal with security of our information and processes. Although there are those in the security world who say that for it to be done well, you must always assume that your attacker knows everything about your system, but perhaps we shouldn't help them. So there is an element of caution, and I'm sure that if we stray into areas which members feel they must ask questions, but where Mr. Gascoigne feels that it is sort of contrary to the ability to protect our information to deal with that, I'm sure the hand will go up and we can decide whether we want to go into private session. Hope that won't be necessary, but the option is there. And in the main, we're considering the access and the quality of the security access to our systems, rather than the more technical details of what's in the box and how it works and how our products protect us. Wayne Murray is addressing us.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. I'd just like to reiterate what Chair has said. The report that we produced as requested by the council might appear a bit brief, but we obviously didn't want to go into too much of the technical details of what the systems that we use. I've not much more to add to the report apart from item 5.9. We have now reached 100% completion of our staff completing their data protection training, and on 5.10 the training briefing that we produced for members took place last Thursday and had quite a good turnout, and some very good questions and hopefully some good answers raised beyond that. So I don't really have anything further to add, but I'm obviously open to any questions you may have.
We have a visiting councillor who wishes to address us.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, everyone online. I come to you from the far depths of Colchester, having been slammed into isolation. And I just want to pick up on a point, actually, that Andrew Weaver's kindly mentioned. We're in a situation here where, unfortunately, we're allowed to debate motions, we're allowed to discuss policies and so forth in committee meetings. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to vote if we've been mandated to isolate now, as I don't think that's right, and I hope a solution is found moving forward, because obviously there will always be exceptions as to why members may not be able to attend meetings, and it's not just maybe COVID related, and we need to maybe look at that, and hopefully the powers that be in Westminster can make that decision moving forward, so that local authorities can be more democratic and, you know, deliver for the good people of their town, especially Colchester. And Stanway, don't forget, don't leave without mentioning Stanway. I just want to say thank you to the officers and staff who are working tirelessly to deliver a safe IT working environment. The members briefing that was given the other day was absolutely brilliant. I've got a technical background, so much of it I understood. There were some bits that even I had to go and Google afterwards, and other search engines are available. But I want to say thank you personally to you guys. I think you've done a fantastic job over the last 18 months plus to roll out a safe and secure working environment, not only protecting the staff, the employees of the council and the members, but additionally the residents, and businesses. There's a lot of personal data that's being held and going backwards and forwards, and payments especially for many. And it's vital that we have an IT infrastructure that's secure and continuing to be so secure in the months and years ahead. So again, thank you guys for that. That was absolutely brilliant. And I just want to bring up on one point that I raised without going into too much detail. I did raise in the members briefing the potential of looking at making it easier for members, for councillors to perhaps access shared calendars, emails. And there was a discussion, a very brief discussion, but perhaps something that could be looked into moving forward. And also from a security point of view, whether or not to slice off the members' email and calendar access into a separate area, which would help with the security moving forward. I think over 1,400 user accounts to manage. And if some of those that only need access to email and calendar perhaps were able to do so in a simpler way, maybe that would help with the security overall. And I'm trying to keep it as high level as I can without going into too much detail. I can see Wayne nodding away there. I'd also just want to raise one valid point. As we move towards safer environments in the town hall to have our committee meetings for council, a couple of points there. Number one, as we move to a digital environment, do we have the infrastructure, the space to physically put laptops, iPads, big monitors, whatever a councillor might need to do their job on behalf of their residents in the chamber? It's quite tight on space, and when we are able to all go back in there safely, as has been mentioned, it'd be interesting to know whether or not we have the facilities there. But additionally, I also want to raise the point that not every member is comfortable with using IT to deliver agendas, for example, and minutes of agendas and so forth. I think there needs to be a bit more, perhaps, openness to allow for printed documentation should that be needed. Obviously, I'm a new councillor and I've come into a digital world, and I'm happy with that. Personally, for me, that's fine. But for others, maybe not so. And I think we also need to address that on a balanced view. It's a digital first environment, but let's look at really what is needed for those members to deliver the best they can for their residents. Thank you, Chair.
If we could deal with a couple of matters raised by Councillor Hagan. Thinking back, I can remember meetings where the agenda has run and reports have run to 470, 500 pages. And in the days when we used to print those, I mean, printing that number of copies for Cabinet plus the extra copies that go around, there must be a very substantial saving in paper as well as a sort of green saving now that those are just referenced as electronic documents. And I remember there was a crusade by one of our senior officers to stop colour printing, which was even more expensive, and only use colour where it was absolutely necessary. Now, this is one of the significant advantages of moving over to a cyber-based operation. And I guess if we start giving members the option to go back to large printed packs again, there are numerous disbenefits in doing so, but we have to be fair and ensure that that members get the essential information they want in the format with which they are happy to participate in their council duties. And I'm not sure who's going to answer this question. I guess it's you, Dan. Have we got the balance right at the moment by pushing everyone onto electronic agendas and reports?
I'd like to answer. The moment, and I think in the short term, is that's why we're, and as Andrew said, we're concentrating on the grand jury room and the West Committee room, because that has the more space to fit more people into it, where you have more desk space, etc. The chamber, because of it's a listed building in the area, we're very restricted on what technology we can put into there. So I think we need to. It's a thing we are looking at, and just seeing what possibilities, because as Councillor Hagan says, some people will need a bigger screen, and you've got limited space on the desks you have in the chamber. So I think it's a longer term project. It's going to take us a bit more time to suss out, should I say. So we're concentrating the grand jury room to get during the short term until the government decides when we're allowed to do hybrid meetings. That'll be our main focus, but we are considering all the options available. And just go back to Councillor Hagan's point about the siphoning off the councillor accounts. It's something we are building a project to look at. So yeah, it's an option to see if it's viable for us to do. Just on that one.
Can I just ask for clarification on that? You said that you were considering the suggestion by Councillor Hagan that perhaps there could be a separate system for councillors which required lower security. Was that
well? Yeah,
where is that? Is that just thinking about it, or becoming more solid than abstract thought?
Well, to be fair, we only discussed it this morning in a meeting, but we're looking at the feasibilities of maybe a subdomain which has limited access to only the information that councillors need, which may use a different security system for accessing. It's literally just started the project. I can't give any guarantees that it's going to be positive, but we're looking at the technical possibilities of what we can do.
And do you have a feel for the costs of such a move, and would they be found within budget, or is this work which would need additional funding by Cabinet to ensure that there was an appropriate balance between the security afforded to councillors' emails and calendar, and the much greater security needed for some of the sensitive data held within our systems?
I couldn't say what pricings or costings we need. It's just at the moment it's going to be an investigation work to see if it is possible, and then we'll be able to look at the feasibility and possibility of doing it. But it's just what from the training that we gave, the questions we came back, we are aware that councillors work a lot differently from council staff, so we need to look at our provisioning for councillors to access the information that they require and the way that they work. So I can't give you any guarantees that this is the way that's going to happen. This is going to happen. We are aware that we're going to have to do a bit more investigation and look into what possibilities are.
Much obliged for that briefing. My final question. I'm not quite sure who I'm asking. Perhaps I'm asking myself. I don't know. But in paragraph 5.9, the clause speaks about the mandatory data protection training, which is required of staff and members. Then goes on to report that while 99 or better than 99% of the training has been completed by staff, only 2/3 of members have completed it so far. And it seems a bit of an anomaly that we have mandatory training, which all members must undertake, yet only 2/3 of members have so far completed that training. So to whom do I address that question? Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure what the question is, but if it is, why has that not been completed? I can only assume it's a matter of timing and that it will be completed so that 100% of members, as with 100% of staff, will have completed the training. If this committee would be minded to remind members of the importance of completing the mandatory training, I'm sure that would be very helpful.
Well, I think the committee should take action, because if we have mandatory training and decide that it is mandatory, then everyone should do it. And if there are good arguments why some members are not doing it, then we need to consider whether it should in fact be mandatory. Councillor Fox.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just on that point around the training, I think maybe that's something that group leaders or the member development group could take up in terms of ensuring that everybody had undertaken the training. That might be a recommendation that we might want to make. I was really interested, and I want to thank the IT staff for the training they put on, because I think it was really useful and delivered, I think, just what we needed in terms of the knowledge around the system, and also the sorts of things that we need to be doing as members in order to keep ourselves and the council safe. The important thing that the training touched upon is the cost and the inconvenience that has been caused to other organisations who have fallen foul of cyber attacks, and we don't want to put ourselves in that situation. And I suppose I'm mindful of reducing the required security for ourselves as councillors in order to make it easy for ourselves, but relying on officers and staff of the council to deliver a high level of security and perhaps a tad more inconvenience in order to keep our systems safe. And I wouldn't want for us to be imposing a two-tiered system in which we got away with stuff and the people that we were asking to deliver services on behalf of our residents had to operate to a higher standard than we did. I think that places us in a difficult position, and a position that a lot of residents would perhaps see as self-serving. And so from that point of view, I think that if we're being advised by officers that we need to meet certain standards and go through certain procedures in order to access, our emails and calendars, and frankly, I know sometimes that can be a little inconvenient, but it's not an inconvenience that I can't handle. That we should do that. That we should follow the advice of the experts and get on with it. There is a difference between the sorts of decisions we might make in our personal lives about our online security, but we are being required to look after a vast amount of personal information on behalf of residents across the borough, and I think that we need to take our role in that in that seriously. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to agree with Councillor Fox. Love to do that whenever I can. I think that's absolutely right. We should just suck it up, frankly, and do what we expect the officers and staff of the council to do. There may be the odd exception, but I think that's how it should be approached as a general rule. And we should set example. That would be the right way to go and do it. In terms of training, I am reminded, I don't think the Members Development Group has met lately, but Dan, that is something perhaps we might, away from here, take up, because that's absolutely right. It's one more voice, and I look across the chamber to a colleague. It's a useful way of just reinforcing one more voice inside our groups to reinforce the need to do what we need to do. Chair, I'd like to ask a question of our speaker, if that's okay. There's lots of potential for detail. I don't want to get into that. I wouldn't understand it either. I do understand something of risk and threat. And it seems to me that cybersecurity inevitably in every domain is about keeping ahead of the threat. So I'd like a view, without us getting into too much that's confidential, about how we think we stand in that sort of overall sense in terms of keeping pace with and ahead of the threat, and how do we as a local authority compare to your view with our counterparts. None of that's any consolation if we have a successful cyber attack. But in terms of the test we should apply, Chair, it should be, how do we stand against the threat in its multitude of forms? And how do we stand against the best that we can sensibly do, and those who alongside us have to also deliver cybersecurity? Thank you.
We're quite lucky, obviously, being a part of a local council. We get a free service from the National Crime Cyber Security Centre. So we've various services where they help us monitor networks. We get notifications of any alerts immediately. I've also had training myself and another colleague. I've had cyber awareness and preparation training. So we've been able to look at ways of dealing with. I mean, we know that there's no way that no one can prevent a cyber attack coming in. So we have built our policies and procedures around for major incident management. If we do get hit with a cyber attack or a data breach, we have procedures and steps in place that come into effect immediately, which we've used a couple of times with a couple of cyber attacks we've had recently, which one did get through for a person hitting the wrong email link, but because of our processes, we were managed to block that off really quickly, and it didn't cause any damages to our systems. But again, we not only from the NSCC, we've got various other groups that we're partnerships with. Ethics Online Partnership, where we have our own internal cyber awareness group where we share information. We're looking at ways that we can get shared training through resourcing. So yeah, I mean, I think we've got as much as we can do for a local authority, which, God, touch wood, we never have to actually implement a major incident. But I think we're in a good stead so that if we do get hit, we're ready to deal with it as best we can. Plus, we've got the various backups from the NSCC and what they call the warning and alert and reporting points with the warps. We've got resources from them that would come and help us deal with any major incidents that we couldn't deal with internally. Hope that helps.
Are there any other questions? So we're required to note the contents of the, sorry, Councillor McLean.
I take on board what's been said this evening, but I'd like to know how you can make using the apparatus we're given more sustainable, more user-friendly. I'm on a computer all day long at work from 7:30 till 7 at night. No problem at all. It works. It's great. Everything's tickety-boo. I go to log into my CBC computer. I've had 3 lots of people out to me. And in the end, I just leave it. It's just such a time-wasting piece of kit for me because when I want to go to it, I want it to work. And the guys have come out, they said, oh, well, they've had to rejig it, go back, have a think, come out again. To me, I'm wasting hours on it, trying to make the thing work, trying to sort the passwords out. You know, I run a computer all day long, but the CBC one seems to be so irritating and confusing and not like my system. I would like something that works, is more user-friendly for me, for each individual person, that you get on with it and you can use it. I don't want to keep ringing up the IT guy, and the IT guy was getting very angry with me and not very happy with me. And I thought, well, in the end, I just closed it and just left it. So I don't want to be reading an agenda off a computer all day and all night. It's not healthy, it's not good for you. My eyesights have deteriorated hugely since I've been having to use computers. So I should have a choice as well. And hence I printed the agenda. I don't want to be looking at a computer screen or even having to carry it into town and lug it around with me. So, so maybe I'm naughty for printing them out, but it is my personal choice. And I prefer to read an agenda, read a book, not read a computer screen. I just don't like them. So, maybe it's my age group, but I don't think we should be forced to. But I think if we do have a piece of equipment, it should be easy, user-friendly, just go to it. But I do not have a go-to machine. I have a machine that sits on my desk next to my main computer, and I hardly ever look at it. I request agendas from different people because it's so much easier to get them on my computer to actually then print them off and read them. So that's personal choice. But if it was a piece of kit that was like my own computer, worked well, was easy, nice to handle, use, take around me, I'll be happy to use it. So sorry, I'm old school and I do not want to do everything on the computer.
Can I just, I'll follow up on that to see what the issues is with the computer that you've been given, and follow up the service desk to see what's been done. But technology-wise, the new laptops that we've rolled out to the council, we've not had any major issues. But I don't know if that's different sort of training has been provided, or we need to look at your systems or see what we can do to help you get onto our systems to work properly. But yeah, I apologise if you've had any issues, but I'll take it personally on tomorrow and see what we can do for you.
I think we're intertwining two separate issues. There's the issue of the maintainability of equipment which is given to councillors. And there's the issue which we're primarily addressing this evening, which is the assurance of quality of the council's cyber security provision. They do overlap to a certain extent because there are, as we've just heard, there are various approaches. There are perhaps those younger members of the council whose whole life is spent on their mobile phone, and they expect to be able to deal with their business, their personal life, their council, and everything on one device of their choosing. And there is the alternative approach that for the council to be sure that information is protected, the easiest way is to give you a laptop or a device which has been set up by our IT department in a way that they know and can trust will protect the council's information. And I think it's going to be very hard to sort an easy path through those diametrically opposed requirements if everyone has access to everything. But we already live in a world in the council where councillors, for instance, and it's written out in the constitution, do not have access to much of the council's sensitive data, with the exception of the scrutiny panel, which can ask to see almost anything, provided there is justification. But in part of our normal business, we don't see that sensitive information. There is no reason why we should do so. If there's an absolute need, it can be carefully presented to us by an officer to avoid large amounts of sensitive information finding their way into councillors' hands. I agree with Councillor Fox that in an ideal world, it would be great to be able to say we want the toughest possible security, and that will apply to the information held by the council, information which councillors hold in their private systems, information which constituents, residents give us. But we're already in a position where the Constitution segregates our access and doesn't allow councillors to see or have unrestricted or unaudited access to much of our information. And we have had presentations by Mr. Weavers in the past about our data protection registration obligations, where, if I recall, there are sort of 3 separate classes of registration. Councillors dealing with political material, which falls under their party political registration. Councillors dealing with ward work, where information of a sensitive nature might be brought to their attention by residents, and we need a personal registration with the Information Commissioner's Office to deal with that. And the issue which we're really dealing with this evening, which is that personal information where data subject information is held by the council and is registered by the council as having a need to have that information and a need to properly protect it to standards which we are assured meet the requirements of the Information Commissioner or whoever sets the requirements for official information or other sensitive information. So it's a rather complex position that I see before us. And I'm not sure that I see an easy way through which will allow councillors to just have access to emails and diary and not have access to other information in a way that enables the system to work. So it's good to know from our officers from Wayne that he is giving some thought to ensuring that councillors have an easy way of carrying out their duties and handling information from their constituents, which doesn't require the full rigours of protecting the data subject information which we have within the council system. But I think it will be some time before we see how that is going to work. Any other points, questions? In that case, can we note the report that we've received on the council's cyber security provision, and also add an additional resolution that we refer to the member development group the situation regarding only 2/3 of members having completed so far the mandatory training on data protection. Is that acceptable? Thank you.
Thank you.
The remaining item is the work programme. Matthew, have you got any changes that you wish to draw to our attention or ask for our consideration?
Yes, thanks, Chair. There's just one. The members just asked to note the Equality and Safeguarding annual update was due to be considered at the meeting of this committee in November, so the next meeting will now not be considered until the meeting in March next year. There isn't a requirement to consider it in a specified time frame, so this doesn't pose any sort of operational difficulties. So if members would just note that, that's the only change I have to draw your attention to. Thank you.
Is that agreed? Thank you. And the next meeting on the 23rd of November has a long agenda, but it's the monitoring officers meeting where we are looking at many of the policies which underwrite the governance of the authority. Is there anything else?
Can't wait until that evening, Chair.
In that case, can I close the meeting and thank you for your attendance